I'm Jordan Hayes, 36 years old, a U.S. Army general responsible for some of the most classified military operations in the world, including missions directly tied to the escalating nuclear tensions between Iran and Israel. But there's one person who never believed I was the real deal: my stepfather, a local cop with a serious control problem, who thought I was just some woman playing soldier. 3 weeks ago, I had to move back into my childhood home after an apartment disaster. I thought I could keep the peace and keep my work under wraps. But that morning, right in the middle of a secure Pentagon briefing about the Iran situation, he kicked down my door, gun drawn, screaming that I was impersonating military personnel. 2 minutes later, 5 black government SUVs rolled up to the house. A fully armed military response team stormed in. And let's just say, that was the moment he finally realized exactly who I am. Before I tell you the whole story, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. And if you've ever had someone try to tear you down or underestimate your worth, hit like and subscribe. This is the story you need to hear today. Growing up in a small military town just outside the gates of a sprawling base we'll call Camp Liberty, I always deep down knew I was meant to serve my country. My father, a career soldier, was the kind of man who embodied dedication and quiet strength. He died during a routine training exercise when I was just 9 years old. His death, sudden and profound, left this gaping void in our lives, a silent space that hummed with his absence. But it also ignited in me a fierce, almost unyielding determination to follow directly in his footsteps, to honor his legacy in the most tangible way I knew how. My mother, Eleanor, she was incredible. She worked double shifts as a nurse, her hands always busy, her feet always moving, just to keep us afloat, to make sure there was food on the table and a roof over our heads. I spent my teenage years with a laser focus, pouring all my energy into academics and the Junior Reserve Officers Training Corps, JROTC. I knew, with an almost spiritual certainty, that excellence in those areas was my golden ticket, my only path to the prestigious military academy. It was more than just a dream, it was a mission. When I was about 15, my mother met Frank Miller. He was a local police officer, the kind of man who filled a room with his presence, his uniform always crisp, his posture commanding. He possessed what, at the time, seemed like a genuine, heartfelt concern for our well-being. Initially, I was more than just skeptical. I was guarded. The idea of anyone trying to replace my father felt like a betrayal. But Frank, to his credit, really made an effort to connect with me. He would show up at my JROTC competitions, his presence a quiet support. He'd help me train for my grueling physical fitness tests, pushing me just enough, offering encouragement. He truly seemed, in those early days, genuinely supportive of my military ambitions. "The military needs strong women like you, Jordan," he told me, his voice firm but kind. After I received my coveted acceptance to West Point, I remember a flicker of hope, a small, fragile flutter that perhaps, just perhaps, we could build a real family again. A new kind of family, but a family nonetheless. The early years of their marriage coincided with my demanding time at the academy. I'd come home on holidays, exhausted but invigorated, to what appeared to be a happy, functional household. Frank would proudly introduce me to his colleagues, always with a booming voice. "This is my daughter, the future general." Though even then, I noticed a subtle discomfort. It always felt less like he was genuinely understanding or celebrating my challenging journey, and more like he was basking in some reflected glory, using my accomplishments as a talking point for his own social standing. After graduation, I was commissioned as a second lieutenant. From the outset, I quickly distinguished myself, particularly in the complex fields of logistics and strategic operations. My superiors, keen-eyed and discerning, noticed my analytical abilities, my meticulous attention to detail, and my relentless work ethic. I advanced through the ranks, quickly, far faster than most of my peers. By the time I was 30, I had already achieved the rank of lieutenant colonel and was being actively groomed for even higher command positions, placed on tracks typically reserved for those destined for true leadership. It was around this time, as my career soared, that I began to notice these subtle, almost imperceptible, but deeply unsettling changes in Frank's attitude toward me. When I was promoted to colonel at 33, he attended the ceremony, his smile fixed, his applause a little too loud. But afterward, the comments started. "Pretty impressive for someone who just pushes papers around," he'd casually remark, his voice dripping with feigned innocence. Or do they just hand these out to meet quotas now? My mother, bless her heart, noticed the tension, that invisible, humming friction in the air, but she'd try to smooth things over, always with that gentle, hopeful tone. He's proud of you, Jordan. He just expresses it poorly. But I knew better. I recognized the insidious signs. The slow creep of resentment. His congratulations became more backhanded, his questions about my work more dismissive, laced with thinly veiled skepticism. I found myself sharing less and less about my career advances, especially when I was selected for highly specialized training in counterintelligence, and then later handpicked for a classified joint task force. When I received my first star at 36, becoming one of the youngest female brigadier generals in recent history, I made a conscious, deliberate decision not to share the news of this promotion with my family. The ceremony itself was classified anyway, given the intensely sensitive nature of my work, but I could have, hypothetically, told them something, given them some vague, non-classified hint. Yet something held me back. "What exactly do you do all day?" Frank would press, his eyes narrowed with suspicion whenever I visited. "Seems like a lot of secrecy for pushing paper and playing politics." I would just smile tightly, a polite, unyielding mask, and offer vague, generic responses about administrative duties, about coordinating between various departments. The less he knew, I instinctively felt, the better, not just for critical operational security, but more importantly, for my own peace of mind. Last month, circumstances completely beyond my control forced me to return to my hometown. My apartment in Arlington, my sanctuary, was undergoing emergency renovations after a catastrophic water main break. I urgently needed a quiet, secure place to work remotely for 6 intensive weeks during a truly critical phase of an ongoing operation. Since my assignment, thankfully, allowed for secure remote work with the proper, stringent protocols, I reluctantly accepted my mother's invitation to stay with them. "It'll be so nice to have you home," my mother had said, her voice filled with genuine warmth. "And Frank's been talking about retirement. Maybe you two can finally bond now that you're both established in your careers." I had my serious doubts, a knot of unease already forming in my stomach, but I meticulously packed my secure communications equipment, double-checking every component, and moved into my old bedroom. It had been converted into a guest room, but it still retained the pale blue I had chosen as a teenager, a faint echo of a simpler past. On the walls, Frank, ironically, had hung my West Point graduation photo and my first commission certificate. I often wondered if these were displayed out of genuine pride, a father figure's quiet admiration, or more cynically, as mere trophies of his tenuous connection to someone, anyone, in the military, a connection he could casually mention, name-drop, to his police colleagues, bolstering his own fragile ego. Little did I know, as I unpacked my gear, that this temporary living arrangement, this brief return to what I hoped would be a peaceful interlude, would instead expose the full, shocking extent of Frank's simmering jealousy, his profound insecurity, and culminate in a confrontation that would permanently, irrevocably alter our entire family dynamic. The first week at my mother and Frank's house unfolded relatively smoothly. A deceptive calm before the storm, I quickly set up a secure workstation in the guest room, transforming the space into a highly functional, if temporary, command center. I also established clear, non-negotiable boundaries about my space and my demanding work schedule. My mother, understanding and respectful, was wonderful. She would always knock softly before entering, always understanding when I explained that some of my calls required absolute privacy, a level of discretion she instinctively grasped. Frank, however, began exhibiting troubling signs almost immediately. It started subtly. He would coincidentally walk past my door multiple times, his footsteps deliberately heavy whenever I was on a call. If the door was closed, he would find increasingly flimsy reasons to knock, offering coffee, asking about dinner plans, or absurdly, claiming he needed to check the air vent in my room. After a particularly important video conference with my team, a call discussing sensitive intelligence from the Iran-Israel theater, Frank cornered me in the kitchen. "Who are you talking to for 3 hours?" he demanded, leaning against the counter, his arms crossed, head tilted slightly. It was his signature interrogation posture, a stance I recognized instantly from years of observation. "Just colleagues," I replied, keeping my tone deliberately neutral, my voice even, as I methodically made a sandwich. trying to project an air of calm normalcy. Must be important colleagues to need such privacy, he pressed, his voice laced with a new edge of suspicion. I heard you mention deployment schedules. I froze momentarily, the bread forgotten in my hands. He had been listening. He had been actively listening to my classified conversation. You misheard, I said, my voice carefully modulated, betraying no emotion. And I'd appreciate it if you didn't try to overhear my work calls. Some information is sensitive. Frank's expression hardened, his jaw tensing. This is my house, Samantha, he said, using my old nickname, his voice low and menacing. Nothing sensitive happens here without my knowledge. I'm responsible for security in this household. My mother, sensing the escalating tension, attempted to diffuse the volatile situation. Frank, Jordan needs her privacy for work, just like you wouldn't want us listening to your police business. Police business is public service, he retorted, his voice rising. Whatever Jordan's doing with all this secrecy isn't the same thing. That evening, I returned to my room, a deep sense of unease settling over me. I immediately noticed subtle, almost imperceptible signs that someone had been in there. My laptop was at a slightly different angle than I had left it. Papers on my desk, meticulously arranged, had been subtly shifted. Nothing obvious enough to directly confront him about without concrete proof, but enough to send a clear, chilling message. He had been snooping. The next morning, without hesitation, I installed a basic but effective lock on my door, citing strict work regulations as my justification. Frank was visibly agitated, his face flushing with thinly disguised anger, but he couldn't argue without explicitly admitting he intended to enter my room without permission. 3 days later, we had our first major explosive confrontation. I was deep in the review of highly classified documents, analyzing drone footage from the contested regions, when Frank knocked, his knuckles rapping loudly on the wood. Before I could even respond, he immediately tried the handle, finding it, predictably, locked. Samantha, open this door immediately, he demanded, his voice strained with impatience. When I opened it, his face was flushed, contorted with barely contained rage. What exactly are you hiding in here? Are you ashamed of your paper-pushing job? Pretending to be more important than you are? I'm not pretending anything, I replied calmly, my voice steady, my gaze unwavering. My work requires confidentiality. That's all. Your work, he scoffed, his voice dripping with contempt. Coordinating supply chains and filing reports? You act like you're running covert operations. I remained silent, my composure only seeming to irritate him more, fueling his anger. You know what I think? He continued, stepping closer, invading my space. I think the military has filled your head with self-importance. You come back here with your classified this and secure that, but at the end of the day, you're just trying to seem special. My mother appeared in the hallway, her face etched with distress, her eyes pleading, Please, both of you, stop this. I took a deep, fortifying breath. I need to get back to work. Of course you do, Frank said sarcastically, a mocking smile twisting his lips. The fate of the nation depends on it, I'm sure. As I closed the door firmly, I heard him mutter, She thinks she's somebody. That night, consumed by a gnawing sense of unease, I called my commanding officer, General Davies, on a secure line, to discuss the rapidly deteriorating situation. The environment may be compromising operational security, I explained, my voice low, matter-of-fact. My stepfather is actively trying to access information. Is he a security risk, Jordan, or just nosy? General Davies asked directly, his tone serious. He's a police officer with a serious control issue, I replied, choosing my words carefully. I don't believe he has malicious intent toward national security, but he doesn't respect boundaries, and seems determined to undermine my position, to prove I'm not who I say I am. We can relocate you to a secure facility if necessary, General Davies offered, his voice calm, reassuring. Not yet, sir, I said after a brief pause. That would require explanations I'm not ready to give my family. I'll implement additional security measures first. The very next day, I caught Frank standing directly outside my door during a call, not even bothering to pretend he was just passing by. When our eyes met through the slight crack in the door, he didn't look embarrassed or sheepish. He looked justified, almost smug. 27 minutes on that call, he noted, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. Sounded important. It was a work call, I stated flatly, my voice devoid of warmth. Your mother tells me you're some kind of logistics coordinator, he said, his voice laced with suspicion. Funny how logistics coordinators need so many secure calls. I realized then, with a jolt of chilling clarity, that Frank wasn't just jealous of my career, he was obsessed. Obsessed with uncovering what he perceived as a facade, a grand deception. His police background, his years of investigating, made him believe he could detect any hint of deception, any lie. And my necessary secrecy, the very nature of my classified work involving the delicate balance of power in the Middle East, triggered every one of his ingrained suspicions, every paranoid impulse. I began finding increasingly disturbing evidence of his systematic surveillance everywhere. A small, nondescript notebook, tucked away but found, where he meticulously logged my calls, complete with precise timestamps of when I entered and left my room. Even cryptic notes about keywords he supposedly overheard from my conversations. It was deeply disturbing, a profound violation of my privacy and professional trust. But I knew, with a certainty born of experience, that I couldn't confront him directly without dangerously escalating the already volatile situation. My mother, caught in the suffocating middle of this escalating conflict, grew increasingly desperate in her attempts at mediation. "He just wants to feel included," she explained weakly one evening, her eyes pleading, her voice barely a whisper. "He was so proud of you at first." "This isn't pride, Mom," I told her gently, but firmly. "This is control. He can't stand not knowing everything that happens under his roof. He believes he has a right to every piece of information." "He'll settle down," she insisted, clinging to a fragile hope. "Just share a little more about your work." But I knew better. Frank didn't want information. He wanted confirmation of his deep-seated suspicion that I wasn't as important as my security measures suggested. And that, fundamentally, was something I absolutely could not give him without compromising national security, without putting lives at risk. By the third week of my stay, Frank's behavior had spiraled, deteriorating from merely suspicious to actively intrusive, bordering on alarming. I discovered he had installed a small covert camera in the hallway just outside my room, supposedly for home security, but conveniently, chillingly positioned to monitor my every coming and going. When confronted, he smoothly claimed it was standard practice in his house, part of his professional duty, and that if I had nothing to hide, I shouldn't be concerned. "I'm a police officer," he reminded me, for what felt like the 1,000th time, his chest puffed out. "Security is my profession. I notice when things don't add up." What alarmed me most, truly sent a chill down my spine, was discovering he had been using actual police resources, publicly funded resources, to investigate me, his own stepdaughter. A seemingly friendly colleague from his precinct, oblivious to the deeper implications, mentioned during dinner that Frank had been running background checks on Sam's contacts. When I questioned him privately, later that night, he became immediately defensive, his eyes narrowing. "You're receiving suspicious calls at all hours," he justified, his voice rising. "Meeting with people you won't introduce to the family. As the man of this house and an officer of the law, I have a responsibility to ensure no illegal activity is happening under my roof." "Those were work colleagues," I explained, maintaining my composure with an almost superhuman effort, while internally I was seething, my blood boiling. "And using police resources for personal investigations is an ethics violation." His eyes narrowed further, a predatory gleam in them. "Are you threatening me, Jordan?" "I'm stating facts," I replied, my voice steady, unwavering. "What you're doing is inappropriate and potentially illegal." The following day, a sense of dread already weighing heavily on me, I found Frank in my room when I returned from a morning run. He was holding my personal phone, not my secure device, but my civilian one, scrolling through my messages, his face grim. "What are you doing?" I demanded, my voice sharp, authoritative. He didn't even look up, his gaze fixed on the screen. "Your behavior has been suspicious. Frequent secure calls, locked doors, mysterious visitors. As a law enforcement officer, I have probable cause to investigate potential national security concerns." "Put my phone down now," I said, my voice deadly calm, a barely suppressed fury simmering beneath the surface. "These text messages with Davies mention operational details," he continued, ignoring my command, his finger scrolling. "Either you're involved in something illegal, or you're exaggerating your importance in the military. Which is it?" I strode forward, my hand outstretched, and firmly, decisively, took my phone from his hands. That was a gross violation of privacy, I stated, my voice low but firm. There is no scenario where you have authority to search my belongings without consent. I'm confiscating this phone, he declared, snatching it back from me with a sudden, aggressive movement. Until I determine it doesn't contain evidence of illegal activity. You have no right, I exclaimed. My patience finally fraying. I have every right, he shouted, his voice booming through the house. This is my house. I won't have some mid-level paper pusher conducting suspicious activities and hiding behind military secrecy. My mother, drawn by the shouting, appeared at the doorway, her face pale with alarm. What's happening? Your daughter is either engaged in unauthorized communications about military matters, or she's fabricating her importance, Frank told her, his voice self-righteous. Either way, as a law enforcement officer, I need to investigate. By illegally searching my property? I challenged Frank directly, my eyes fixed on his. My mother, her hands clasped together, pleaded, Please give Jordan her phone back. Surprisingly, he did, throwing it onto the bed with a gesture of disgusted dismissal. I've seen enough anyway, he muttered. Playing soldier with your little friends, pretending to be important. After he stormed out, my mother stayed, twisting her wedding ring nervously. Her eyes filled with worry. Jordan, maybe if you just explained a little more about your work. I can't, Mom, you know that. But he's becoming obsessed with this. He barely sleeps, constantly checking if you're making calls. I sighed, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. I need to move out. This isn't healthy for any of us. No, she said quickly, her voice laced with desperation. That would only convince him you have something to hide. Please, just a few more weeks until your apartment is ready. I reluctantly agreed, the thought of the escalating conflict already exhausting me, but I immediately took additional, more serious precautions. I contacted General Davies again, informing him of the dangerously escalating situation. Your stepfather illegally accessed your personal device? He asked, his concern palpable even over the secure line. Yes, sir, and he's using police resources to investigate my contacts. This is now an operational security risk, General Hayes, General Davies said firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. We need to extract you or address the situation definitively. I understand, sir, but an abrupt departure would confirm his suspicions and potentially create more problems, I argued, trying to think several steps ahead. He's a police officer with connections. If he believes I'm involved in something illicit, he might escalate this further, potentially involving federal authorities, which could create a whole different kind of mess. You have 48 hours to resolve this situation, General Davies concluded, his voice unwavering, or we're moving you to secure housing and dealing with the fallout. Understood, sir. That evening, Frank's behavior reached new, alarming levels of audacity. During dinner, he casually mentioned, his voice a little too loud, a little too innocent. I spoke with Jackson today about your friend Davies. Interesting that a logistics officer has direct contact with someone working in Pentagon Special Operations. My blood ran cold. He had investigated General Davies. He had crossed a line that was not just personal, but profoundly professional and dangerous. You need to stop, Frank, I warned, my voice low and serious, my eyes fixed on his. You're crossing lines that have serious consequences. He just laughed, a harsh, dismissive sound. Consequences for doing my job? I protect this community from threats, including those hiding in plain sight. Later that night, I overheard him on the phone with a colleague, his voice hushed but clear, requesting surveillance on suspicious military personnel who had visited me at the house. This was no longer just about fraught family dynamics or a petty power struggle. He was actively compromising operational security, putting real people, real operations at risk. I immediately began preparations to move out, making contingency plans, updating my secure files. But then, an urgent notification flashed across my secure device. A critical operation, directly related to intelligence on Iranian nuclear sites, and the U.S. response, had entered its final, most sensitive phase. I absolutely needed to participate in an emergency secure call with the Joint Chiefs and the operational team. The following morning, moving would have to wait until after this crucial communication. That night, I lay awake in my bed, the quiet house amplifying every sound, listening to Frank pacing the hallway outside my room. His footsteps were heavy, deliberate, occasionally stopping near my door, a faint creak of the floorboards betraying his presence, listening. The confrontation, I knew with a grim certainty, was inevitable now. All I could do was ensure it happened on my terms, not his. I needed to be ready. The morning of the Pentagon call, I woke at 0500 hours, long before dawn, to prepare. The house was shrouded in a heavy silence, a pre-dawn stillness, as I meticulously set up my secure communication equipment and reviewed the briefing materials that had arrived through encrypted channels. The operation, a delicate, high-stakes endeavor involving global security, had reached a truly critical juncture. Decisions made in today's call, I knew, would directly impact national security at the highest levels, potentially shaping the geopolitical landscape for years to come. At 0630, I heard Frank's alarm go off, its shrill sound echoing faintly through the quiet house. Usually he left for his police shift at 0700, which would have given me a clear, uninterrupted window for my 0800 call. But when 0700 came and went with no sound of his departure, no engine starting, no car pulling out of the driveway, I grew deeply concerned. Through my door, I could distinctly hear him moving around in the kitchen, making coffee, opening and closing cabinets with an unnecessary, almost aggressive force. My mother knocked softly at 0730. "Jordan, Frank called in sick today," she whispered, her voice laced with anxiety. "He says he has a migraine." Frank had never, not once, taken a sick day in the 5 years I had known him. This, I knew, was deliberate. This was a calculated move. "Thanks for letting me know," I replied calmly, keeping my voice even, giving nothing away. "I have an important call at 8. I'll need complete privacy." "I'll make sure he understands," she promised, though her voice betrayed her palpable anxiety, her worry for what was surely coming. At precisely 7:50, I initiated the secure connection protocols, my fingers moving quickly, efficiently, performing the required authentication procedures with practiced ease. As the system established the encryption, the digital locks clicking into place, I sent a quick text to my mother. "Starting important call now. Please ensure no interruptions for the next hour." She replied with a simple thumbs-up emoji, a small, reassuring gesture that, in that moment, felt incredibly important. At precisely 0800, the connection went live. On my screen, the faces of power appeared. General Davies, his expression already serious, 2 stern-faced Joint Chiefs representatives, their backgrounds nondescript, and the operational team leaders, their faces grim, already deployed near the target zone in a remote, hostile area. "Good morning, General Hayes," General Davies began, his voice crisp and clear. "Let's start with the situation report from Colonel Finn." As Colonel Finn began detailing the target surveillance, providing updates on an Iranian ballistic missile site, I became acutely aware of movement in the hallway outside my door. The old floorboard that always creaked, the one I had heard so many times, was carefully avoided, but I could unmistakably sense Frank's looming presence, his silent watch, maintaining my absolute focus on the briefing, absorbing every detail. I subtly shifted my position, angling my chair to keep the screen out of view from the door, just in case. 20 minutes into the call, as we were deep in discussion about extraction protocols for the embedded team, a delicate, highly sensitive phase of the operation, I heard a soft, metallic click from the doorknob. Frank was attempting to open my locked door. I muted my microphone momentarily, my jaw clenching. "I'm on a secure call," I called out firmly, my voice unwavering, betraying no panic. "Please do not disturb." The handle stopped turning, but I could still feel his oppressive presence just outside, a tangible weight through the wood. The briefing continued, moving seamlessly to the most classified portion, regarding critical intelligence assets in the region, the very lives of our operatives hanging in the balance. General Thompson was discussing exquisitely sensitive details, outlining the next phase of the counter-proliferation effort, when a loud, jarring bang suddenly shook my door. Before I could even react, before I could even process the sound, the door burst open with a violent splintering sound around the lock, shards of wood flying inward. Frank stood in the doorway, his face contorted with unbridled rage, his service weapon, a heavy black pistol, drawn and aimed loosely in my direction. "Police, hands where I can see them," he shouted, his voice booming as if conducting a raid, his breath ragged. On my screen, the Joint Chiefs and the operational team, their faces illuminated by the monitor's glow, froze, their expressions a mixture of shock and immediate concern, witnessing the profound, unthinkable intrusion into a top-secret briefing. "This is a classified military communication," I said clearly, my voice remarkably steady, maintaining my composure with an almost superhuman effort, while simultaneously unmuting my microphone. "General Davies, we have a security breach, initiating Containment Protocol Delta." This was a coded, prearranged message, signaling an unauthorized civilian had accessed highly classified information and that an immediate rapid security response was required. General Davies nodded grimly, his face hardening before my screen instantly went black. The system, designed for such critical moments, had automatically terminated the connection and initiated emergency security protocols, encrypting all data and triggering a rapid response. Frank stormed forward, his movements jerky, agitated. He holstered his weapon, but immediately produced a pair of handcuffs, the cold metal glinting. "You're impersonating military personnel and accessing restricted government communications," he declared, his voice thick with self-righteous fury. "As a law enforcement officer, I'm detaining you until federal authorities can investigate." "Frank, you need to stop this immediately," I warned, standing my ground, my eyes locked on his. "You have no jurisdiction or authority here." "Hands behind your back," he shouted, grabbing my arm roughly, his grip bruising. My mother appeared in the doorway, her face ghostly pale with shock, her hands flying to her mouth. "Frank, what are you doing?" "Protecting national security," he responded, his voice strained as he forcibly twisted my hands into the cuffs, despite my controlled, practiced resistance. "Your daughter is either engaged in espionage or committing fraud by impersonating high-ranking military personnel." The cuffs clicked shut around my wrists with a chilling finality as Frank continued his tirade, his voice raw with accusation, forcing me to my knees. "You think I'm stupid?" he spat, his face inches from mine, his eyes wild. "I heard you talking to generals about classified operations. You're a logistics officer who sits behind a desk. You expect me to believe the Pentagon is consulting you on covert operations regarding Iran and Israel?" He pulled his gun again, not pointing it directly at me, but holding it visibly. A clear, unmistakable intimidation tactic. A raw display of his desperate need for control. "You've been playing make-believe soldier, pretending to be somebody important," he sneered, his voice laced with contempt. "Did you think no one would catch on?" My mother was crying now, soft, choked sobs escaping her lips. "Frank, please stop. This is insane." "Stay out of this, Eleanor," he shouted, his voice sharp, dismissive. "You don't understand what's happening here." He forced me further to the floor, pressing his knee into my back in a standard police restraint position, grinding me into the carpet. Despite the profound humiliation and the sharp discomfort, I remained preternaturally calm, a quiet core of certainty within me, knowing exactly what was already in motion, precisely what was coming, based on the security protocols I had initiated. "You think you're somebody?" Frank taunted, his voice thick with resentment, almost a plea for me to confirm his twisted narrative. "Playing your little war games, acting like you're saving the world? I've been protecting this community for 20 years while you play dress-up in an office somewhere." "Frank," I said quietly, my voice surprisingly clear, audible despite the pressure on my back. "In approximately 4 minutes, you will understand exactly who I am. I strongly suggest you remove these handcuffs before then." He laughed harshly, a bitter, disbelieving sound. "More fantasies. Should I expect the Secret Service to show up?" "Not the Secret Service," I replied evenly, my gaze fixed on a point beyond him, almost as if I could see them approaching. "But you will want these cuffs off me before my security detail arrives." His knee pressed harder into my back, a futile attempt to assert dominance. "There is no security detail. There is no important Jordan Hayes. There's just a delusional woman who's finally been caught in her lies." My mother had retreated further into the hallway, her sobs now audible, a frantic, desperate sound as she fumbled with her phone, likely dialing 911, which, I knew, would only complicate the situation further, adding another layer of chaos. 3 minutes had passed since the call had terminated. I knew precisely what was happening. General Davies, swift and decisive, had immediately activated the security protocol, dispatching the nearest military response team, a specialized unit, to my exact location. The secure system, with its pinpoint accuracy, had tracked the breach precisely, identifying the threat in real time, and responders were already, I knew, en route, closing in. "Last chance, Frank," I said calmly from my constrained position on the floor. "Remove these cuffs and we can discuss this rationally." "Shut up," he snapped, but I detected it. A fleeting hint of uncertainty, a tremor of doubt creeping into his voice, as my continued unshakable composure clearly unnerved him, chipped away at his manufactured bravado. Then, unmistakably, we both heard it. The deep guttural rumble of heavy engines, a sound distinctively military, pulling up outside, their powerful presence shaking the very ground. The tires crunched on the gravel driveway, followed by the crisp, synchronized sound of multiple car doors opening and closing in rapid succession. A symphony of coordinated movement. Frank, his eyes wide with disbelief, moved unsteadily to the window, keeping his gun, still, trained in my general direction, a desperate cling to his authority. His face, visible in the filtered morning light, visibly paled, draining of all color as he looked outside. "What the hell?" he muttered, his voice barely a whisper, and almost childish confusion in his tone. "Why are there black SUVs outside?" "That would be my security detail," I informed him slowly, deliberately, maneuvering myself into a sitting position despite the restrictive handcuffs, my eyes never leaving his shocked face. "I suggest you put your weapon away before they enter. They won't ask questions first if they see you armed." Frank's hand trembled slightly as he slowly, almost hesitantly, holstered his weapon. The movement labored, but his pride, that fragile, brittle thing, wouldn't let him fully admit his catastrophic error. "This is some kind of trick," he insisted, though his voice had lost its earlier conviction, its force. Heavy, disciplined footsteps pounded up the front steps, followed by an authoritative, unyielding knock that seemed to shake the entire house, rattling the very foundations. "U.S. military personnel, open the door immediately," a commanding voice called out, clear and resonant. My mother, still reeling from shock, moved instinctively toward the front door. "Eleanor, don't open that door," Frank shouted, his voice a desperate plea, but it was too late. I heard the door creak open, followed by the controlled chaos of a tactical team, their movements precise and practiced, entering the premises. Professional voices identified themselves to my mother, who was presumably, confusedly, directing them toward the bedroom. Frank positioned himself instinctively between me and the doorway, his police training deeply ingrained, kicking in as he adopted a defensive stance, a pathetic last stand. "This is a police matter," he called out, his voice regaining some of its former authority, though it trembled slightly. "I have detained a suspect for impersonating military personnel and accessing classified information." Colonel Marcus Reed, his tall frame filling the space, appeared in the doorway first. His tactical gear was pristine, his sidearm clearly visible, holstered. His keen eyes quickly assessed the volatile situation, narrowing perceptibly when he saw me, General Hayes, handcuffed and on the floor. "Sir, I need you to step away from General Hayes immediately," Colonel Reed stated, his tone firm, leaving absolutely no room for argument, his voice like cold steel. Frank blinked, his eyes wide with profound confusion. "General who?" 4 more team members, all similarly equipped, appeared silently behind Colonel Reed. Their disciplined positioning, their ready stance, made it abundantly clear they were prepared for any resistance, any hostile action. "Brigadier General Jordan Hayes, United States Army," Colonel Reed clarified, his voice sharp, authoritative. "Currently serving as Deputy Director of Joint Strategic Operations. And you, sir, are currently restraining her illegally." Frank's face drained of all color, becoming ashen as his gaze snapped back to me, recognition dawning in his eyes, a dawning horror. "That's impossible. She's a logistics officer." "That was my cover 5 years ago," I said quietly, my voice calm, almost sympathetic to his shattering world. "My actual role has been classified since then, especially with the current tensions in the Middle East." Colonel Reed stepped forward, his expression resolute. "Sir, I won't ask again. Step away from General Hayes and provide the key to those handcuffs." Reality, cold and undeniable, seemed to finally penetrate Frank's profound disbelief, his desperate denial. He fumbled frantically in his pocket for the handcuff key, his hands trembling visibly, moving woodenly toward me, his movements almost robotic. As he unlocked the cuffs, the metal cold against my wrists. His hands were shaking so violently he almost dropped the key. The moment the restraints were removed, a wave of cold relief washing over me, Colonel Reed's team moved in smoothly, a seamless, practiced maneuver. 2 members, their faces professional and calm, gently helped me to my feet, while the others immediately created a protective formation around me, a human shield. "Are you injured, General?" Colonel Reed asked professionally, his concern genuine. "I'm fine, Colonel," I assured him, rubbing my wrists, the red marks already forming. "Thank you for the prompt response." "That was efficient." "General Davies ordered immediate extraction," he explained. "Your security was compromised during a Level 1 communication. We have a secure vehicle ready to transport you to a protected facility." My mother had appeared fully in the doorway, her face a mask of profound confusion and shock, her eyes wide. "Jordan, what's happening? Why are they calling you General?" I turned to her, my expression soft, gentle. "Because that's my rank, Mom. I'm a brigadier general. I couldn't tell you because of the classified nature of my work, especially with the delicate operations involving Iran and Israel. But Frank said you were just a—" Her voice trailed off, the full, shocking implications hitting her like a physical blow. Frank stood frozen, a statue of defeat, his world collapsing around him in a silent, agonizing implosion as the team efficiently secured the room. 1 military police officer was already disconnecting and meticulously packing my communication equipment, securing every sensitive component. "Mr. Miller," said a stern-faced military police officer who had joined the group, his voice firm, authoritative. "You are being detained for interference with a classified military operation, assault on a military officer, and illegal interruption of secure communications. These are federal offenses, Mr. Miller." Frank seemed to visibly shrink before our eyes, his shoulders slumping, his once commanding presence reduced to a shadow. "I didn't know," he mumbled, his voice weak, barely audible. "I thought she was lying about her importance." "That's precisely the problem," I said, finding my full, commanding voice, letting it resonate with the authority he so despised. "You assumed I was exaggerating my position because you couldn't accept that I had achieved a level of authority that threatened you, that exceeded yours." The military police officer proceeded to read Frank his rights, his voice clear and methodical, while securing him with the very same handcuffs Frank had used on me mere minutes earlier. The irony, bitter and profound, wasn't lost on anyone in the room. My mother stepped toward me, tears now streaming freely down her face, glistening. "All this time, you were actually a general. Why couldn't you tell us? Tell me." "My position requires absolute secrecy, Mom," I explained, my voice gentle but firm. "The operation I was coordinating this morning involved personnel whose lives depend on that secrecy, real people on the ground in a volatile region. I couldn't risk a leak." I took her hands in mine, squeezing them reassuringly. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way. This wasn't how I ever wanted to reveal it." She looked over at Frank, who stood handcuffed, defeated, his head bowed. "He's been obsessed with proving you weren't as important as you seemed. He couldn't stand not knowing, not being the most authoritative person in the room." "Ma'am," Colonel Reed interjected respectfully, his voice interrupting the private moment but necessary. "We need to move General Hayes to a secure location immediately. The compromise of this morning's communication has created an urgent situation requiring her attention." I nodded, a silent acknowledgement, then turned back to my mother. "I have to go, Mom. We'll talk soon, I promise." "Will Frank be—" She couldn't finish the question, her voice trembling. "He'll face consequences for interfering with national security operations," I said honestly, my gaze unwavering. "But I'll ensure he's treated fairly, for your sake." As the team escorted me out, their movements swift and professional, I passed Frank. He couldn't bring himself to meet my eyes, his gaze fixed on the floor. "You know what the saddest part is, Frank?" I said quietly, my voice low, so only he could hear. A final, unvarnished truth. "I would have told you eventually, when the time was right, if you had just respected my boundaries, instead of trying so desperately to diminish me, to build yourself up by tearing me down." Outside, 5 black government SUVs with heavily tinted windows were parked in formation, their engines humming faintly, a silent testament to the power that had just descended upon our quiet street. Neighbors, drawn by the commotion, had gathered on their porches and lawns, watching in utter astonishment as I, General Jordan Hayes, was escorted to the center vehicle with full visible security protocols. Just before entering the SUV, I looked back at the house, a place that had been both a refuge and a cage. My mother stood in the doorway, a solitary figure, watching, her face a mixture of shock and emerging pride. Her daughter finally being recognized for who she truly was, while her husband, Frank, was led, handcuffed, and broken to another vehicle. His world of control and perceived authority, his carefully constructed identity, had been completely upended, shattered into a million pieces. In that profound moment, despite the very real operational security breach and the deep personal betrayal, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief, a release of a burden I had carried for years. The pretense, the constant charade, was finally over. For better or worse, the truth about who I really was had finally come to light, brought forth by 5 black SUVs and a desperate man's undoing. The convoy of SUVs proceeded quickly and efficiently to a secure military facility located about 30 miles outside of town, a nondescript, heavily guarded compound. During the drive, which felt both incredibly long and incredibly short, I was immediately briefed on the immediate security measures implemented following the breach. The Joint Chiefs, reacting swiftly, had temporarily suspended the critical operation until a full security assessment could be completed, until every potential vulnerability was identified and mitigated. A digital forensics team, highly specialized and discreet, was already, I was informed, meticulously examining my compromised equipment, searching for any traces of data loss or unauthorized access. "General Davies is waiting to speak with you, General Hayes," Colonel Reed informed me, his voice professional, concise. "He's established a secure communication line at the facility." I nodded, my mind already racing, sifting through contingency plans for the compromised operation, calculating risks, devising new strategies. "What's the status of the field team, Colonel? Are they holding position at the secondary extraction point? Any compromise detected there?" "No compromise detected yet, General," he confirmed, his voice reassuring. At the facility, I was immediately escorted to a secure communications room, a sterile, windowless space designed for absolute confidentiality. The screen activated, revealing General Davies's concerned but resolute face. "General Hayes, are you all right?" he asked immediately, his eyes searching mine. "Yes, sir, physically fine, though my pride's a bit bruised," I admitted, a wry smile playing on my lips. His expression, however, remained serious, grave. "Your stepfather has created a significant security breach, General. Initial assessment suggests he may have been monitoring your communications for weeks, possibly months." "I believe that's correct, sir," I confirmed, the realization solidifying in my mind. He had been escalating his surveillance behaviors for some time. "He's currently being questioned by military intelligence, General," General Davies continued. "The initial reports indicate he's cooperating fully, claiming he genuinely believed you were impersonating military personnel to appear important, to inflate your status." "That aligns perfectly with his behavior pattern, sir," I stated, the pieces falling into place. His ego simply couldn't accept my authority, couldn't reconcile it with his preconceived notions of me. General Davies's expression softened slightly, a rare moment of empathy. "This isn't the first time family members have struggled with the classified nature of our work, General Hayes, though it's certainly one of the more dramatic responses I've encountered." "What about the operation, sir?" I asked, forcing myself to refocus on the critical mission, pushing personal feelings aside. "The situation regarding the intelligence on the Iranian missile sites?" "We've implemented the contingency protocols you designed, General," he replied, his voice firm, confident. "The team is secure and will resume once we've assessed any information compromise. Your quick thinking with the Delta Protocol prevented any critical details from being exposed, General. You saved lives." A knock at the door interrupted us. Colonel Reed entered, holding a tablet. "Sir, we have the preliminary report from Mr. Miller's questioning." I reviewed the document, my eyes scanning the lines, which confirmed all my suspicions, every fear I'd had. Frank had indeed been systematically monitoring my communications, convinced, absolutely convinced, that I was exaggerating my military importance, that I was a fraud. His police background had, chillingly, given him the tools and the misguided confidence to conduct his own investigation, which he justified to himself, and to his interrogators, as protecting national security from what he perceived as my fraudulent behavior. "He still doesn't fully grasp what he's done, General," Colonel Reed noted, his voice flat. He keeps insisting he was just doing his duty as a law enforcement officer. Classic authority displacement, I said, a bitter taste in my mouth. He couldn't reconcile my actual authority with his perception of me, so he created a narrative where I was the one overstepping, the one deceiving him. General Davies then addressed the next crucial steps. General Hayes, we've arranged secure housing for you for the remainder of your remote assignment, a place where you can continue your vital work without fear of intrusion. He paused, his gaze direct. As for your stepfather, Mr. Miller, he's facing serious federal charges. Given your position and your critical role in national security, we need to know how you want to proceed with his case. I considered carefully, weighing my options, my primary concern always paramount. My primary concern, I stated clearly, is operational security and the safety of our personnel. Beyond that, sir, my mother shouldn't suffer unnecessarily for his actions. She's a good woman caught in a difficult situation. Understood, General, General Davies confirmed, a flicker of approval in his eyes. We'll process him through military channels rather than civilian courts. This will allow us more control over the information made public, protecting your family's privacy as much as possible. After finalizing the immediate security protocols, getting back to the mission-critical work, I requested permission to speak with my mother. She arrived at the facility 2 hours later, her face drawn, her eyes red-rimmed, escorted by a kind female military officer who had been assigned to explain the complex situation to her. When I entered the meeting room, she looked up, her expression a mix of bewilderment and profound sadness. "Jordan," she said, her voice breaking, as she stood and rushed forward to embrace me, her arms tight around me. "I don't even know what to call you now." "Mom is still fine," I assured her, returning her hug, holding her close. We sat down, and she studied me with new eyes. Eyes that saw me for the first time as a different person, a general, not just her daughter. "A general," she whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "My daughter is a general, and all this time, Frank was trying to prove I wasn't." I finished gently for her. I wasn't important. I patiently explained the classified nature of my work, the stringent security protocols, and the fundamental reasons for compartmentalized information. The need-to-know basis that governed my life. It wasn't about trust, Mom, I emphasized, my voice soft but firm. It was about procedure, about protecting the people under my command, about safeguarding the lives of those we send into harm's way, especially in the volatile environment of the Middle East. She nodded slowly, the truth settling in, heavy but undeniable. "And Frank?" she asked, her voice hushed. "They won't tell me exactly what's happening to him." "He's being held for interfering with national security operations," I explained, choosing my words carefully. "The charges are serious, but I've requested that he be processed through military rather than federal civilian channels, which gives us more control over the narrative and impact." "What does that mean for him?" she pressed, her anxiety still palpable. "It means we have more control over how the case is handled," I explained. "There won't be public records that could affect his police pension or future employment, but he will face consequences, Mom, significant ones." She twisted her wedding ring nervously, a familiar habit. "He really thought you were pretending, didn't he? He became obsessed with proving it." "I know," I said softly, the sadness in my voice genuine. "That's why I've requested a psychological evaluation as part of his processing. This goes beyond simple jealousy or control issues. It's deeper than that." We talked for nearly an hour, a conversation that spanned years of unspoken truths. I explained as much as I possibly could about my career, filling in the gaps of the past 5 years with the non-classified portions of my challenging journey to becoming a general. "I was so proud of you even when I thought you were just a logistics officer," she said, wiping away fresh tears. "Now I find out you're this important person with all these responsibilities." "I'm still me, Mom," I reminded her, trying to bridge the chasm of her newfound understanding. "The same person who calls you every Sunday, the same person who sends you terrible attempts at knitting for Christmas." That drew a small, watery laugh from her. "Your last scarf did look like it had been through a war zone, I'll give you that." As our meeting concluded, I addressed the immediate practical concerns. "I've arranged for you to stay in military family housing until the situation with Frank is fully resolved. It's comfortable, and you'll have support available if you need it." "And our house? My things?" she asked, her voice tinged with worry. A team is packing essential items for you now, Mom. Nothing will be left unsecured, I promise. She stood, straightening her shoulders, a gesture of quiet strength I suddenly realized I had inherited directly from her. My daughter, the General, she said, a hint of genuine pride finally breaking through the shock and grief, her voice firmer. Your father would have been so proud. As she was escorted out by the military officer, Colonel Reed returned with an update, his tablet in hand. Mr. Frank Miller has been transferred to the military detention facility at Fort Hamilton, General. The psychological evaluation has been scheduled, and the operational team is resuming mission parameters with adjusted protocols. General Davies has requested your return to the command center once your personal situation is fully stabilized. I nodded, feeling the immense weight of both my professional responsibilities and my complex personal circumstances pressing down on me. Please arrange transportation for tomorrow morning, Colonel. I need to ensure my mother is settled first, that she has everything she needs. That evening, as I meticulously prepared for the next day's return to full operational duties, reviewing new intelligence reports on the regional threat, I received a message from the detention facility. Frank had requested to speak with me. After careful consideration, weighing the emotional cost against the potential for closure, I agreed to a brief, monitored conversation via a secure video link. He appeared on the screen, looking diminished, his shoulders slumped, dressed in a standard detention uniform. The confidence, the overbearing authority he had always projected, was now completely absent, replaced by a hollow defeat. Jordan, he began, his voice hesitant, then corrected himself, his tone laced with a grudging respect. General Hayes, I've been informed of the seriousness of my actions. Yes, I replied simply, my voice calm, neutral. I still can't believe it, he admitted, shaking his head slowly, almost to himself. All this time, you were actually a... He couldn't seem to say the word, that single, impactful title. A general, I finished for him, my voice clear and firm. Brigadier General, United States Army, responsible for intelligence coordination in critical global theaters. He shook his head slowly again, his gaze distant. Why didn't you just tell me? Would you have believed me, Frank? I asked, my voice direct, cutting through the pretense. Or would you have demanded proof I couldn't provide due to security protocols, due to lives at stake? His silence was answer enough. The psychologist says I have issues with female authority figures, he finally said, his voice barely audible, raw with a new, forced vulnerability. He says that I was deeply threatened by your success, by your achievements, and that I created a narrative where you were the one being deceptive, the one lying to protect my own fragile ego, my own sense of self-importance. That seems accurate, Frank, I acknowledged. Neither accusatory nor forgiving, just stating a fact. Your mother, he said hesitantly, his gaze lifting to meet mine. Is she okay? She's processing a lot right now, Frank, I replied honestly. Finding out her daughter is a general and her husband is in military detention, all in the same day, is a lot for anyone to handle. He winced, a flicker of remorse in his eyes. What happens now? That depends on several factors, I replied. Maintaining my professional demeanor, including your cooperation and the final security assessment of what information you might have compromised. He looked directly into the camera for the first time, his eyes pleading. I never meant to harm national security, Jordan. I just couldn't accept that you were more important than me, that your authority surpassed mine. The raw, unvarnished honesty of that statement hung in the air between us, a silent, painful truth. The military psychologist will help you work through those issues, Frank, I said, my voice measured. In the meantime, I suggest you reflect deeply on why you felt so threatened by a woman's authority that you risked everything, your career, your family, your freedom, to undermine it. As the call ended, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Vindication, yes, a quiet satisfaction, but also a deep sadness for what had been lost, and a certain profound peace that comes with finally being seen, truly seen for who you truly are. Tomorrow, I would return to my duties, commanding troops, coordinating operations that impacted national security, facing the very real threats from Iran and its allies. But tonight, I was simply a daughter and a stepdaughter, navigating the raw, painful aftermath of a family illusion finally, irrevocably, shattered by truth. 3 months have passed since the day Frank handcuffed me during that critical Pentagon call. The operational mission that was temporarily compromised was successfully completed 2 weeks after the incident, thanks to the robust contingency plans we had meticulously implemented. All personnel returned safely, every life secured, and the security breach was fully contained, without any lasting damage to national security, a testament to the resilience of our protocols. Frank's case proceeded through military channels, precisely as I had requested. After extensive psychological evaluation and debriefing, where he slowly, painfully, began to confront his own demons, he was formally charged with interference in military operations, unauthorized access to classified communications, and assault on a military officer. Given the unique circumstances and his subsequent cooperation during the investigation, he received a suspended sentence of 2 years, mandatory psychological treatment for 5 years, and 5 years of supervised probation. His police career, however, was unequivocally over. The Internal Review Board at his precinct, conducting their own investigation, discovered he had indeed been systematically using police resources to investigate me and my contacts, resulting in his dishonorable discharge from the force. This perhaps was the most significant punishment for a man who had built his entire identity, his sense of worth, around his authority as a law enforcement officer. My mother initially stayed in the military family housing I had arranged, finding comfort and support there. But after 6 weeks, she made the difficult, courageous decision to file for separation from Frank. "I can't be with someone who would treat my daughter that way," she explained to me during one of our weekly dinners, her voice firm, unwavering. "Even if he gets help, even if he changes, I'll never forget seeing you handcuffed on the floor while he stood over you with his gun. That image is burned into my mind." She has since moved into a comfortable, sunlit apartment near my permanent residence in Arlington, where I returned after the renovation of my condo was completed. The close proximity has allowed us to rebuild and strengthen our relationship in ways that weren't possible when I was maintaining my deep cover. "I understand now why you couldn't tell us everything," she told me recently, her hand clasping mine. "I just wish I had trusted you instead of needing to control you." As for Frank, his path to recovery and understanding has been challenging, arduous, but he is, remarkably, showing progress. His therapist reports that he's genuinely confronting his deeply ingrained issues with female authority and the toxic masculinity that drove his desperate need to be the dominant, most authoritative figure in any room he entered. I agreed to one supervised meeting with him at the specific recommendation of his treatment team, a step they believed was crucial for both our healing processes. It was awkward, undeniably, filled with long silences and uncomfortable truths, but it was necessary. "I still have moments where I can't believe my stepdaughter outranks every officer I ever worked with, combined," he admitted, a wry, self-deprecating smile on his face, a new expression for him. "But I'm learning to recognize when my ego is being triggered instead of acting on it." "That's growth, Frank," I acknowledged, offering a small, encouraging nod. "I've been thinking a lot about why I couldn't just be proud of you," he continued, his voice soft, reflective. "I think somewhere along the line, I started believing that your success somehow diminished mine. That if you were important, it meant I wasn't." "Success and importance aren't finite resources, Frank," I told him, a core belief of mine. "My achievements don't take anything away from yours. Your worth isn't determined by my rank." "The therapist says I've been defining my worth through my position of authority my whole life," he said, his gaze distant. "When I couldn't exercise authority over you, it felt like I was losing my identity, losing myself. We parted with a better understanding, a fragile, nascent connection, if not a complete reconciliation. Some wounds, I've learned, take longer to heal, and some trust, once shattered, can never be fully restored. Professionally, I've continued my duties with a new, enhanced security team and significantly bolstered protocols, lessons learned from the painful incident. General Davies has been incredibly supportive throughout the entire ordeal, demonstrating true leadership. He even shared his own deeply personal experiences with family members struggling to understand the classified nature of military leadership. My first wife left me because she thought I was having an affair, he confided, his voice quiet, vulnerable. I was actually running a covert operation in Eastern Europe, but the late nights in secrecy looked exactly the same to her. By the time I could tell her the truth, years later, she had remarried. The incident with Frank and General Davies's shared vulnerability has made me profoundly more conscious of how I interact with my own team, especially those who must maintain deep, elaborate covers with their families. We've implemented additional psychological support resources for personnel struggling with the intense compartmentalization that our critical work, particularly in sensitive regions like the Middle East, requires. Perhaps the most valuable, most profound lesson I've taken from this entire experience is the inherent danger of allowing others, anyone, to define your worth, your capabilities. Frank's desperate need to diminish me came purely from his own deep-seated insecurities, not from any actual deficiency in my accomplishments or my character. That's a pattern I've observed repeatedly throughout my career. Those most desperate to assert their authority, to demand recognition, are often the ones least comfortable, least secure with their own inherent value. I've also gained a deeper, more profound appreciation for authentic relationships, those built on mutual respect, on shared understanding, rather than on toxic power dynamics. My mother and I now share a level of honesty, a profound depth of conversation that wasn't possible before. My team operates with a transparency appropriate to our security clearances, fostering a new kind of trust. Even my limited contact with Frank is now based on truth, however painful, rather than the debilitating pretense that once defined our relationship. This morning, I received my second star, officially promoted to Major General, in a quiet, deeply meaningful ceremony attended by my mother, her eyes shining with unshed tears, and the colleagues, the true friends, who have supported me steadfastly throughout this challenging period. As General Davies, his face beaming with pride, placed the new insignia on my uniform, he leaned in and whispered, "Your father would be proud, Jordan, and so am I." Later, at the small, intimate celebration, my mother embraced me fiercely, tears streaming down her face. "I always knew you were special, Jordan," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I just never imagined how truly extraordinary." "I'm still the same person, Mom," I reminded her, holding her close. "No," she said thoughtfully, pulling back slightly, her gaze piercing. "You were always extraordinary. I just didn't have the full picture, not until now." As I look toward the future, toward the complex challenges of leading our forces, of safeguarding national security in an increasingly unstable world, I carry the profound lessons of this experience into each new challenge, into every decision. True authority, I now understand with an unshakable certainty, doesn't come from demanding recognition, from exerting control over others. It comes fundamentally from competence, from unwavering integrity, and most importantly, from the genuine respect you earn through your actions, through your character, through your leadership. Frank tried to handcuff me to his limited, distorted perception of who I could be, to keep me small, controllable. In breaking free from those restraints, physical and metaphorical, I not only reclaimed my own identity, but perhaps, in a small, unexpected way, I also helped him begin to understand his own destructive patterns, his own profound insecurities. Sometimes, the people closest to us are, ironically, the last to truly see us clearly. Sometimes, the truth, raw and undeniable, arrives in the most dramatic fashion, with 5 black SUVs and a dedicated security team. And sometimes, the most powerful moment isn't when others finally recognize your authority, when they finally see your rank. It's when you stand firmly, unapologetically, in that authority yourself, regardless of who tries, in their own insecurity, to diminish it. If you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or controlled by someone who simply couldn't accept your potential, who couldn't stand to see you shine, I truly hope my story gives you strength, gives you courage. Your worth, remember this always, is not ever determined by others' perception of you. Your achievements, your hard-won successes, are never diminished by someone else's insecurity, no matter how loudly they try to shout it. And your truth, your authentic self, will eventually, inevitably, emerge. No matter how many handcuffs, how many barriers, try to restrain it. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to hear more experiences from women in positions of authority. Share in the comments a time when someone underestimated you and how you handled it. Have you ever had someone close to you try to diminish your achievements? How did you respond? Your stories help build our community of support and understanding. Remember, we rise by lifting each other up, not by putting others down.